Here are 9 questions, grade 9 questions from review of chapters 2, 3, 5, and 7 on rational numbers, on exponential forms and powers, on adding and subtracting polynomials, and multiplying and dividing polynomials. So your first question gives you a fraction question, a bedmass question, and it's a grade 9 question because it involves the multiplication of negative numbers and the addition and subtraction of negative fractions as well. So using bedmass, the first thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to figure out what 1.5 times 2 3/4. Now if you want to work that out over here, change them both to improper fractions. Multiply your numerators and multiply your denominators, you get negative 33/8. I'm just going to write that right here. Okay. So the product of those two fractions is negative 33/8. The next step, of course, from grade 7 when you added fractions was to create equivalent fractions. And the grade 9 learning is that when you are adding two fractions that are positive and negative, you still use the same procedure, keep the base, add the exponents. But in writing this step out, you remember that you have to actually have a difference between negatives and positives. How many more do you have? You have 27 more negatives, and therefore your solution is negative 27/8, which translates to 3 and 3/8. Negative 3 and 3/8. The second question gives us square roots of two different types of numbers and then asks you to add them together. The first is the square root of a fraction plus the square root of a decimal. And since I told you you can't use a calculator, the rationale you had to do here is you knew that it's a fraction multiplied by itself gives you 1 over 25. 1 times 1 and 5 times 5 is what you would have there. So your answer for the square root of 1/25 is 1/5. Conversely, if you have the square root of a decimal and you're not allowed to use a calculator, what we learned to do is say that think of the decimal as a fraction instead. So the square root of 4/100ths is what that decimal is. What fraction multiplied by itself gave you 4/100ths? The answer is 2/10. So therefore, as a fraction, you have this question. And if you wanted to, you could also say, well, since 1/5 is 2/10 and 2/10 is 0.2, both of these questions would be the same. From a decimal standpoint, your answer would be decimal 4. And from a fraction standpoint, it would be 4 over 10, which is 4/10. Okay? So either way you did it, if you changed them both to decimals, you got decimal 4 as your answer. If you changed them both to fractions, you got 4/10 as your fraction, or in lowest terms, 2/5. Third question deals with chapter 3 on exponential form and powers. Some people said, what does this number outside the brackets mean? And remember when we talked about it, it means two things. You can think of it as being the opposite of, or you can think of it as being a -1 coefficient. Either way, if you multiply something by -1, for example, if you multiply 7 by -1, you get -7, or 7's opposite. If you multiply -3 by -1, you would get 3, which is the opposite of 3. So really thinking of it as the opposite of, or a coefficient outside the brackets of -1, either way works. So when I simplify this, because -2 is in brackets and the 4 exponent is outside brackets, that means that -2 the exponent of 4 means -2 multiplied by itself 4 times. 2, 4, 8, 16. It's a positive 16. So you have the opposite of the positive 16 plus, because the exponent is inside the brackets, that means it's not used in repeated multiplication, which means this is thought of as the opposite of 2 times 2, which is -4. And 1 multiplied by itself 10 times is still 1. So now that we have that, we could probably at this point say, well, the denominator of 1 doesn't affect it, so I could just erase it because it's not going to affect my answer. The opposite of positive 16 is -16, or multiplying positive 16 by -1 is going to give you -16. And -16 plus -4 is -20. Your next question also deals with powers. 4 to the exponent of 0. Any base to the exponent of 0 is 1. except if it was this, because this is the opposite of 4 to the 0, in which case this would have been a negative 1. However, if it had been negative 4 in brackets to the exponent of 0, it would have been a positive 1, because any base to the exponent of 0 is 1, unless that base is not defined with brackets. So 4 to the exponent of 1 is, or 4 to the exponent of 0 is 1. Negative 2 cubed is negative 2 times negative 2 times negative 2, which is negative 8. Take away 5 squared means take away 25. Some people thought this might be the same thing as this, or the same thing as this, but it's not. It's take away 5 squared. It's not a negative at all. It's just a take away 5 squared. 1 plus negative 8 is negative 7. And negative 7 take away 25. If you have to do that, go ahead. But negative 7 take away 25 is negative 32. Okay, we're back. Your next question is also an exponent form question. It says, how many bacteria are in a dish after 1 hour if they triple every 15 minutes and 10 started in the dish? So if you look at your formula, exponential growth, the formula for exponential growth is your starting number multiplied by the rate of change to an exponent of number of time units. Units of time. I wrote that backward. Time units of number of. There we go. Perfect. So our starting number in our dish was 10. Our rate of change was this word right here, tripling. And our number of time units, well, if an hour was how long it was, but it triples every 15 minutes, that means there was 4 15-minute intervals within that 1 hour. So our exponent would be 4. 3 to the exponent of 4 is 81. And 10 times 81 is 810. So therefore, there would be 810 bacterium in the dish after 1 hour. 810. And if we think about that, so at 0 minutes, there was 10 bacterium. After 15 minutes, it would have tripled. So there would have been 30. After 30 minutes, if it tripled again, it went from 30 to being 90. After 45 minutes, it would have tripled to 90, making it 270. And at 1 hour, it would have tripled 270, making it 810 bacteria. Our next question says, interpret and simplify from chapter 5 on adding polynomials. The first polynomial, I'll put in brackets, it's negative x squared plus 2x minus 3, plus your second polynomial, which is 2x squared minus x plus 1. If we think simply from a modeling standpoint, those two create an algebraic zero pair, leaving me with an x squared. These two create an algebraic zero pair, leaving me with just an x or a positive x. And this create an algebraic or an integer zero pair, leaving me a 0 or negative 2, excuse me. If I did it here, those two would make x squared, those two would make positive x, and those two would make negative 2. Our next question gives us a subtraction, and let me ungroup this for a second. So for this one, what you need to do is you need to change it to addition, and every one that's inside the brackets of the second polynomial, we'll learn you have to use the opposite of it. So here we would change it to this. Gather like terms. You start with your highest degree terms of all of your terms first, which is your x cubed. So negative 2x cubed, there are no other x cubes. A 4x squared and a negative 4x squared cancel each other out. There's none left. A negative 2x and a negative 3x make a negative 5x. And a negative 2 by itself is negative 2. So your solution is negative 2x cubed minus 5x minus 2. And your last question in the review gives you 2x cubed multiplied by 2x, no, second last question, I guess. So here we need to use distributive property of multiplication. Each of these terms must be multiplied by 2x cubed. So if you wanted to write it out, that's the first one. That's the second one. And that's the third one. So what you'd end up with is in the first one, you get 4x to the 5, because 2 times x times x times x is 2x cubed, multiplied by 2 times x, which is 2x squared. So you have 2 times 2, which is 4, and x multiplied by itself 5 times is 4x to the 5. This would be plus 4x to the 4, because x cubed and x equals 4x to the 4, minus 10, because if we think about this multiplied by negative 5, these two would make negative 10 and x cubed. And you cannot add those any further because they're not like terms. They have the same variable but not the same exponent. So you cannot combine them by adding them or subtracting them. And your last question gives you both adding polynomials and multiplying polynomials in the same expression. First thing you do is your multiplication, because you'd follow bedmass. So 4x squared plus 2x squared minus, 6x, because 2x times negative 3 is 6x. Keep flip change when you subtract. You have plus 2x there. Now that you have it down to simply adding and subtracting, you're going to gather your like terms. Your x squareds are going to give you 6x squared, and those two are going to give you negative 4x. So your solution to this one would be negative 4x. You can't add them any further.